G'day and welcome to The Other Side Interviews, our weekly Tuesday night interview show to complement our Friday night news show, The Other Side Australia. I'm Damien Curry. My guest this week on the show is a small business person, an occasional politician and a passionate thinker who studies the concept of natural law. It's a theory that might help us understand the political, economic, social and philosophical wackiness of the times that we're living through. Natural law is a theory in philosophy that says that all humans are born with an inherent universal set of moral rules that govern human conduct. These laws aren't imposed by governments or imposed by courts, but are our inherent sense of right versus wrong, or justice. The concept of natural law was addressed by the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, the Roman philosopher Cicero, and even impacted the founding of the United States. It's based on the idea that everyone in society shares the same idea of what constitutes right and wrong, and that everyone wants to live a good and innocent life. That this is the basis of a universal shared morality. Part of natural law involves natural rights, such as those expressed in the United States Declaration of Independence in the first paragraph, written by Thomas Jefferson. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Rob McMullen, welcome to The Other Side Interviews.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. Rob, basically, that was a definition of natural law. What is the definition of natural law that you hold as somebody who's involved with the Natural Law Institute?
Well, interestingly, the first thing I could say is I'm pretty sure the original quote from Jefferson was the Lockean version was life, liberty, and the pursuit of property.
Pursuit of property.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they changed it to happiness.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Someone fact checked me on that, but I'm pretty sure from memory the Lockean quote was life, liberty, and property.
Okay, so property rights are core to the philosophy of liberalism that we talk about a lot on this show. But natural law is its own sort of philosophical school, right?
Well, look, the term itself refers to different things. So there's a lot of confusion. In the first instance, we all know there are laws of nature.
Yep.
Which we can discover through science.
Yep.
So in the first instance, you're talking about gravity, electromagnetism, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Atomic forces, that sort of thing. So there are laws in nature. Human beings, being a subset of nature, there are tendencies, if not laws, there are definite tendencies that we can rely on that govern our behaviour.
Right.
And in the third instance of thinking about that concept is the idea that you can't ultimately escape the laws of nature. They will impose their consequences whether we acknowledge them or not.
Right.
So if we wish to not fall afoul of the negative consequences of violating the laws of nature and human beings as we can understand them, then we should optimize our cooperative and legal systems to incorporate our knowledge of that.
Now,
Does that make sense?
and a lot of our legal system in the Western world does actually go back to these concepts of natural law, right?
A lot of it does. It's a very long idea. It's a very, has a very deep history. A lot of people have referred to the idea that there is a order to the world and there's an order to people, and that should show up in our legal systems and our societal systems.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's just, before we get into what some of those things are, let's talk about where our culture is now and how we've moved away from that idea in the past 50 years with the concepts of postmodernism and of sort of neo-Marxism, or this idea of relativism, for starters, that everything is just relative, that there are no natural laws in a sense, that it's just one person's ideas and another person's culture and another person's culture. The answer to that, of course, being that no, there are these universal concepts that are natural laws, and that's a controversial thing for a left-wing thinker or a Marxist who's going to say, well, no, there are many different ways to live. There are many different ideas of values. Different cultures have different values and different beliefs. and that all are equal, and then we need to. This seems to be the modern way of thinking, right?
What struck me with the previous iterations of natural law thinkers you were talking about, a lot of it relies on moralisms, that we should have a right to pursue happiness and things like that. Whereas the people that I'm associated with and the levels of sort of science and physical science and social science that we can draw on now, it's where I'm coming from is almost like a post-moral framework, because it's the understanding now is that largely what people call morality is that their strategy, their evolutionary group strategy or their acquisition strategy. So we might say this is what's moral, but human beings respond to incentives. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
So
this is one of the core aspects of.
So this is one of the core aspects, especially where I'm coming from, is if you want a certain behaviour in people, you might say, we'll do this because it's moral.
Yeah.
Whereas almost like a post-moral framework is to gear incentives. And this is not very flattering, actually, but sometimes to re-engineer from the bottom up, we have to go to quite an unflattering baseline of human behaviour. And so one of the social science ideas that we'll draw on is that we are either an evolved or a created organism, it doesn't really matter, but the idea that the idea of acquisitionism is that our brains are geared to acquire, and in Austrian economics they'll say people respond to incentives.
Yes.
It's the same concept.
Right.
Jordan Peterson, in his more religious framework, says we see the world through a story.
Yep.
Which I think says we see the world through what we value, which means we see the world through what matters to us, which means we see the world through what helps us acquire status, reproduction, living, thriving.
Okay. So in behavioural psychology, they would simply say we move towards pleasure and away from pain.
That's right.
Right.
Or in like Ayn Rand's...
That's human motivators.
Yeah, or in Ayn Rand's framework, she says, we need to defend the idea of selfishness as opposed to altruism, and that's...
So Ayn Rand, just for those who don't know, is a libertarian thinker from America who grew up in Russia and
that's right.
suffered under.
And I'm not endorsing that view, but it's just good to paint the picture.
Yep.
I think that's a very low resolution way to put it. But the idea is that everybody has their own incentives. Is that human beings are, like every organism grows and wants to thrive and reproduce itself. Same with human beings. And so that's kind of the unflattering baseline that we should acknowledge about human beings. And so when you talk about what's moral, a lot of the time what people are calling morality is their acquisition strategy.
Okay, right. Okay. The strategy that we use to acquire. But the morality part comes into, like, it's this complicated idea that, selfishness, like, as you said, as Ayn Rand said, selfishness actually is good in a way because it drives people to behave the way they would naturally behave, and that through that desire to get the best outcomes for myself, I take care of the collective, right? So it's not an anti-collectivist idea in that sense. It's basically saying that the best outcomes for the collective occur when I focus on my needs.
Well, look,
but hang on, that's libertarianism.
That is
a lot of people criticise that, obviously, because, well, no. I mean, you can act very irresponsibly for your own needs and your own, but then I suppose someone else would say, well, that's not you acting in your best interest, really. You just think you are. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Well, see, that's what I talk about. That's what I say when you were referencing, even Aristotle, Jefferson, Locke, and the other thinkers along these
liberal
lines.
Thinkers, yeah.
A lot of it is very low resolution, and the good news is we actually can do a lot better now in terms of redefining what's going on here. So I used the idea of selfishness with Ayn Rand just to talk about acquisitionism, but really at the end of the day, reciprocal exchange is what is moral. So it's not immoral to be selfish, it's immoral to fulfill your incentives at the expense of someone else's.
Right.
And once again, I'm still kind of moralizing a bit there, but the more of a scientific natural law thing is to say the most profitable interaction between people is reciprocal win-win cooperation.
Right.
And that's what the liberal tradition did have right. And you know, the British modern state, you're talking about the Anglo-libertarian thinkers from Britain, is the idea of markets, is because they did have this idea of voluntarism and interacting in a market, and it does create wealth. It does create prosperity. And so once again, to tie this back scientifically, one of the big natural laws that does exist is the idea of entropy. This is getting pretty deep, but I personally find it fascinating.
Yeah, we're up for deep.
You're up for deep.
We're up
well,
for
you know,
deep.
it's not a 10-minute segment, so let's go there.
Right, let's go
there.
there.
So inherent in nature is the idea of entropy.
Right.
And it is a force that is always creeping up on us. And so we don't live in a steady state. We need to outrun entropy. We need to stay ahead of it. And so
just explain what entropy is for people who don't know. It's basically things fall into bits.
Things fall into bits.
Naturally, over time. If you leave everything alone, it's not going to be there when you go back.
It's the natural decay in the universe.
It's my teenage daughter's bedroom.
That's right.
Falling to pieces.
But it's my grey hairs coming out.
Yep.
It's me leaving the world to my children because I've entropied and passed on. You know?
Right. Okay. So we live in a world of entropy. It's a lot of
the idea of time-based breakdown.
Decay.
That's an inherent function of nature.
Okay.
We can't escape it.
Right.
So what human beings do is cooperate to create excess wealth or excess resources to enable us to outrun that entropy.
Right. Now, this is interesting because it's not a question of cooperation versus individualism or collectivism versus individualism, right? Because the cooperation has to be there. I think our current political debate sits inside that, where it's kind of like left versus right. What's the best way to cooperate?
That's right.
And the right say, well, the best way to cooperate is laissez-faire, free market cooperation, where you have small government, low intervention, you don't get involved in the market, just let people do their thing.
Yep.
And the left says, no, the best way to cooperate is for a few of us to sit up on top and tell everybody else what to do.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and that's the conflict that we have at the moment. But you're talking about given that conflict, beyond that, the reality is we live in this entropy bubble, and we're all in it, whether we like it or not. Right?
That's right.
Okay.
So, you know,
can you get out of it, Rob? This is the question. I want to get out of this entropy bubble.
Well, look, what people like myself and others have generated is that once again, getting back to the ideas of like acquisition of, are we selfish? Are we members of a collective? Whatever. At the end of the day, win-win cooperation is the most profitable interaction that we can have. That it's going to allow us to find market opportunities for greater efficiencies, create that excess wealth, which really in scientific terms are talking about we are living organisms that are trying to capture excess energy to further insulate ourselves from that creep of entropy.
Got it. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
In the same way that if I don't eat, I will succumb to entropy. So me eating is a capture of energy. If I cooperate with other people and create excess food, that's a huge store of energy, which lets us further hold back entropy. Then if we do that civilizationally, we have an even bigger buffer between us and entropy. We have a bigger buffer between us and nature's laws that we can't change. And so once again, instead of just trying to moralize and say, well, this is right, this is wrong, it's incorporating human incentives to optimize our systems of cooperation so that we can capture the most energy, we can capture, create the greatest buffer between us and that baseline of nature's laws that we really don't want to come up against. And so at the end of the day, it's not really whether, I'd be happy to not really ever have a discussion about individualism versus collectivism ever again.
Right.
Because I feel like it's low resolution to the point of being silly. Are we individuals or are we part of a collective? We are actually both.
Yeah.
So we have both forces.
It's stupid to say one or the other.
Every person who's not an ideologue will acknowledge that we have both forces acting upon us. So to put all
just
this,
on that point, because a lot of people don't. I mean, on the I would call that extreme libertarianism. The idea that we're absolute individuals, and there are extreme libertarians in Australia's Libertarian Party, I can vouch for.
That's right.
There are also conservatives and the left who are very, very into control and the collective, and they want everybody to live a certain way and live their way, right?
That's right.
Interesting that we put conservatives and the left in the same bucket there, but they are, right? That is that collective idea.
Yep.
Okay, so they're the two extremes. That's the paradigm you're talking about now. And you're
Yes.
saying that those two things, you're sick of that argument, that we actually are both individual and collective.
There is enough science and social science that we can draw on now to understand what drives each of these ideologies.
Got it, okay.
And so we can actually put these into a higher resolution framework.
Yep.
And I won't go into it because I don't want to derail our conversation, but we can actually do that. But what we really look at is, okay, human beings are all driven to acquire. Cooperation it's a scientific statement to say that cooperation
Is positive for the individual as well as the
well,
group.
yeah, but it also is the most profitable generation of excess wealth or capture of energy.
So let's just take a tangent here because I want to. It
Sure.
just ties into something that I'd just like to raise, which is the Harvard Negotiation Project. Anybody who's studied negotiation understands this concept of win-win. It sounds a bit cheesy when you say win-win nowadays because it's been so used in sales and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But it actually comes from some pretty hard research. And the idea of the Harvard research into this is that you don't want to be leaving value on the table. So the idea of if I take a oppositional approach to a negotiation and it's all about winning for me, then there's a very good likelihood that the two of us as negotiating parties will leave value on the table that we could have extracted if we both came in looking at underlying interests, talking more deeply about what, having a negotiation about solutions we could, because you might value something I don't.
Yep.
So it's not costing me anything to give it up.
Absolutely.
And I might value something you don't, doesn't cost you anything to give it up.
Absolutely.
And then you would add up
and that's a productive division of labour.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so in the management schools, they say that's extracting, they measure your success of your negotiation not by who wins, but by did you extract the maximum value possible from that negotiation.
Yeah, and this is what
Or did you
Austrian
leave?
economists talk about growing the pie.
Yes, exactly.
Finding
Yeah.
greater efficiencies. So what I want to say though is I don't want to stay in the realm of well, people should just get along. No, we actually get very technical about this.
Okay.
And we draw in all this science, social science and incentives and etc. And we boil it down to the only equal sign that you'll find between people, that is possible between people. Like if you share a morality, i.e. you share a strategy or incentives, people get along anyway. But it really matters when you have a conflict. You need to actually get back to how do we define cooperation across, it's easy for us to get along because we have the same values. So that's fine.
You're Vladimir Putin or...
That's right. But if I was talking to someone from the Greens Party, which I maybe share some criticisms of current society, but I don't share a lot of their ideas of the solutions. So then we have to define, well, how exactly do we cooperate? And so what we come down to is reciprocity. Reciprocity defined by is an interaction between us according to 5 criteria. Voluntary, so that shares with the libertarians. Is it productive? Is it warranted? Is it warranted? I'll explain it. Is it fully and exhaustively informed?
Okay.
And is it free of externality on the demonstrated interests of others?
Okay.
So voluntary is self-explanatory. Did you choose this?
Right. Okay. I'm just trying to imagine myself with the green.
Oh, yes, right.
Okay, so walk me through it, all right? I'm sitting opposite, somebody with a hyphenated surname who's a green. They all seem to have hyphenated surnames. So the first thing is voluntary. What does that mean? Okay, so we're sitting there having a conversation.
It's pretty easy to test if something's voluntary. Did people voluntarily choose it?
Okay.
But here's the kicker. This is a description of all the aspects, the intuitions that people have that should you violate them will create in them an incentive to break cooperation or even retaliate. I.e., this is a description of all the aspects of reciprocity that if you violate them, it's going to make people unhappy.
Right. Okay.
And once again, when people are unhappy, they're not cooperating, which is entropic.
Okay. All right. So what you're
See what I'm
saying?
saying? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you don't meet those 5 criteria,
People
Right?
get
These
unhappy.
are not rules that have been invented.
No.
These are the natural laws.
This is a
This is
description
trying
of-
to understand the 5 criteria, what is naturally... You're describing the natural order.
I'm describing human intuitions.
Right, okay.
So, you know, we all want to win. So once again, if cooperation is win-win, well, this is a description of the elements that come into, that humans will intuit, that will constitute a win for them.
Okay.
So let me just give some concrete examples.
All right.
We understand voluntary.
Yep.
Productive is, as you said, is in an interaction, are we creating a surplus of value? Now, there's actually a YouTube video of a very famous libertarian who overtly defends the idea of blackmail
Yeah.
on the basis that it's a voluntary transaction. Because as you know, these extremist libertarians will boil things down to, well, as long as you don't violate physical aggression, the non-aggression principle, as long as you're not enacting physical aggression, then it's voluntary. But what that actually does is it actually licenses all forms of passive aggression.
Yeah.
You know? So they hone in on this one thing. So he
Well,
defends...
the left would say coercion. It licenses coercion. That's a whole other story. But
Yeah,
we'll
but non-physical
get into that.
coercion.
Yes.
And there's social coercion, there's emotional manipulation, all these other things.
Okay, so we have to be
Yeah,
mindful of those
That's
things.
right.
Yeah.
And so the second category of productive, and so what that would be violated by blackmail because the other person isn't responding to an increase in value. They're escaping your imposition of a negative value.
Yes.
So it's, you might be profiting, but I'm losing.
Yes.
I'm paying you to stay where I am.
Right.
So you come and you say, well, I'm going to publish these pictures of you and your mistress or whatever. If you do that, I have a decrease in value. But if I've never heard from you, I'm no better off.
Yeah.
So you're actually profiting at
Yeah.
my loss.
Right. Got it.
Whereas
Okay.
the category of productive is we're both better off.
Yes.
So that's why I said if you look at this sort of theory,
So that would knock the libertarian extremist, I should say extremist libertarians. I've got a lot of Liberal Democrats or Libertarian Party people who watch the show who might get offended by that
That's right.
categorisation. So let's just
That's
be
right.
clear. That's an extreme libertarian position.
Absolutely, yeah.
That
Yeah.
blackmail would be okay. What you're saying it's not okay, not because of some moral creed written down in the Bible, but it's not okay because it violates that idea that we're not productively moving. It's not a win-win, it's a win and a lose, and
yeah.
it's a negative.
it should be
incentive.
empirically testable because once again, we're going as scientific as we can. Do human beings empirically feel happy about being blackmailed? No.
No.
Well, why? Well, we've
Okay.
just described why.
Right, okay.
Because
So
it's an imposition of a cost. They're paying, they're losing a value just to escape a negative imposition.
Yes, yes.
They're not being...
No, you're taking me to -10 and then
That's
bringing me
right.
back to 0 if I pay you.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you're profiting at my...
So I wish I hadn't have met you.
That's right. That's
got it
right.
back, yeah.
That's
Okay.
right. That's right.
All right. So that's number 1 and number 2. We've covered
Voluntary,
and
productive.
productive. Okay, it's got to be productive, not.
That's
not
right.
Eroding.
Warranted.
Third is warranted.
Warranted. Well, that's not really a hard thing. What is a warranty when you buy a product?
Guarantee.
It's a guarantee. If I buy a car and I drive it out of the driveway and the wheels fall off, well, I should have some degree of warranty. But in any transaction, it's just the same idea. Is there any demand on say, a green that says, if we transition to renewables, you'll have cheaper, more plentiful energy? Do they have to warranty that statement? No.
If you take this vaccine, you won't get COVID.
Exactly. And so that's an issue of warranty. Are they able to provide restitution in the if
the outcome isn't achieved?
If their transaction, the transaction you're having with them, falls short of what they should warranty?
Okay. So the value basically takes the value that you're offering in the moment and says, I commit to that value over time.
Yeah, it's saying if you suffer any negative value as a result of dealing with me, can I provide restitution to you?
Right.
And so that alone there it knocks a lot of sacred cows out in our current political landscape.
It sure does.
The
Which makes
next
you
one.
realise how much our political landscape is in that direction, right? It's
For me, when you actually really get down to the nuts and bolts of cooperation and reciprocity specifically, and how much it's violated, it's not a surprise why we have the levels of societal unrest.
Unrest
that we do
okay.
now.
And this is the concern, right? It's where this is going to lead. This
That's right.
unrest.
That's right.
And we're not noticing it. Let's come to that after
That's
we get
right.
through all five.
Sure.
So okay, so we've done
voluntary, productive, warranted,
What's
fully
the fourth one?
and exhaustively informed.
Fully and exhaustively informed. Okay.
That's right.
Hit me with
So
that.
there was an article going around on Twitter, which I commented on, about a lady who was complaining about her levels of HECS debt.
Okay.
Because she'd
That's-
gone into...
For our international viewers, HECS debt is the Australian government debt for tertiary education, for university education or college education.
University
okay.
debt, yep.
Yep.
Or if you're an American, college debt.
College debt.
And she had, I just read this article, and she had done a music degree and then decided to change to a Masters of Divinity,
Okay.
whatever that is. I'm not.
It's a study of theology, but it's a study of God, isn't it, or theology? And
Well, I mean, if you said theology, I would understand.
Righto, yeah, I'm
but
not
yeah.
sure,
Anyway, so I made the point: are young people fully and exhaustively informed about the contract they're entering into when they undertake a university debt and the prospects of the market for every degree? And so I said, if you want to warranty and fully inform the service that you're selling and profiting from, imagine if a young person came and said, I want to do a degree, and the university published, maybe valid every year, a industry economic returns index.
which they do, actually.
Do they?
Well, some of the MBAs do it. The MBA schools tell you, this particular MBA school moves people's annual salary from X to Y over a period of time.
Well, that's a great
right?
idea. So that's,
and they rank them according to that.
Absolutely.
So,
Well, that's informing the people. To my knowledge, I don't know to what degree that's university.
but they also have to tell the other side of the story, right? Otherwise, people are going to get peed off. They've got to say, well, okay, but that might not occur, right?
Absolutely.
Given certain economic situation. Or
Absolutely.
if we start pumping out MBAs every 5 seconds, we're going to devalue the distinction you're getting from that degree.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's basically what's happened in higher education over time, is that my father used to always say this, even 30, 40 years ago, he would say, the value of an associate diploma and a diploma and a degree, a bachelor's degree and a postgraduate certificate and postgraduate diploma and then a master's. It's like it's all being devalued, so that now if you don't have a master's,
absolutely.
so-
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a credentialism creep or inflation.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry,
So,
come back.
well,
come
look,
back on topic.
I was just coming at this from off the top of my head, and
Yeah.
because I haven't been in tertiary education for 20 years, and so I don't remember doing that myself. But just
But
that's
thinking through,
thinking
what's
through.
the value I'm going to get out of
There's
this
another
if I take on this debt. Most kids don't.
That's
and they're
right.
Not, and the universities are not telling that story.
That's right.
The story they're telling is, hey, do a degree and you'll be just like your parents.
That's right.
That's not so much the case anymore. Right?
That's right. Look, and another element to reciprocity is that older people who run big institutions, there's an asymmetry of knowledge, wisdom, and agency between them and your standard 17, 18-year-old. And so to reciprocally honour that asymmetry, and they do this in banking as well, it's called responsible lending, people do all sorts of things, but the bank has to do due diligence to make sure that they, in essence, have to take more responsibility to
Now, I
make
can hear the
sure that...
libertarians saying, well, tough luck, it's your responsibility to inform yourself.
And I'd say why? Because you've invented this concept of the non-aggression principle. That's your moralism, that's your sacred cow, which is your strategy. That's you...
Yeah, holding on to that ideology.
Because it suits you.
Because
That's
it
your
suits you.
strategy.
But the reality is, those stakeholders, those people are going to be upset. And it's the natural law that creates that upset or that feeling of injustice
Be
or that
empirical.
feeling of being wrong.
Yeah, be empirical about what makes people feel like they haven't been cooperated with, honestly.
But look, I've worked in public relations, right? And we divide everybody up into stakeholder groups, and then you sit down with all this, you try and get as much positive cohesion as you can, negotiation, all that sort of stuff to try and understand each other.
Yep.
But you're going to get situations where one person's view is completely diametrically opposed to the other person's view, and they're never going to agree, right? So
Correct.
someone's always going to feel aggrieved to a certain extent.
Correct. So you get in the nitty-gritty, there's, as the costs of of people's complaints go up, there's more need for judgment. You know, if it's a minor dispute, it doesn't really need to go to a court or anything.
Right.
And also too, just because there might be some areas that are hard to figure out doesn't mean we can't also try and look at a more high resolution framework.
Yeah.
So look, the idea once again is exhaustively informed. Are people exhaustively informed about the details and the returns they can expect on dealing with you?
Okay, so that's
And
number
so
4.
That's number 4.
People
So
should
look,
be exhaustively informed.
Well, yeah, and when people aren't fully informed about the nature of a transaction.
So here's a criticism of. Sorry, you finish first. I'm sorry.
Empirically test. Are people unhappy?
Yeah.
You know, so it's another dimension to reciprocity.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you unhappy? Are you okay with this deal? Are you happy with the information? That's the sort of thing you would say.
Yeah, and do
right?
you know what you're getting into?
Yeah. Before you buy.
And also too, like you said, maybe it's not true for everybody, but it was definitely my general understanding. I could be corrected on this, but universities, and it was just one example I thought of in the moment as well. There'd probably be a lot of other ones, but universities rely on a general social understanding of the value of the credentials. And the reality might be different, as you said, because of credential inflation.
Yeah.
You know, so people think, well, I can get a degree in anything, and well, I've got a degree. Of course, I'll earn money.
Well, that's the implication.
That's
and that
the
was the
implied.
implication with, if you've got a college degree in America, you're going to be okay.
That's right.
And so all these kids have got college debt and they're going out into the workforce going, I'm ill-equipped for the workforce.
That's right.
What the hell happened?
So that's a great way to
Why
put
do I
it.
have to pay my debt?
Is the university profiting through implication and insinuation?
Yeah.
Or are they profiting, or is it
historical benefit rather than future benefit?
That's right.
If I did that with a financial product, I'd be in jail because
Well,
you've got to say in the finance sphere, you've got to say this may go down.
That's right.
This investment might go down.
Is an implication fully informing someone? No.
Yeah. Right.
And people feel violated when they may be acting on an insinuation or an implication, but the reality doesn't manifest.
Yeah.
And I'd also say, once again, you're talking about young people who there's an asymmetry of agency, of wisdom and economic understanding between them and the people that are profiting from them.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why they get upset. So that's one of the examples in which I do sympathise with maybe the Greens or whatever, going, well, you know, society, anyone should in good faith be able to admit that society has a general understanding that university degrees are, you know, a good qualification to have, and that you should be able to find some employment, and it's a path to a certain level of income. When that doesn't materialise, and you find that that was only an implication, people do get upset.
But Rob, it's only an implication, and it doesn't materialise because of this idea that everybody should get a degree, that everybody can get a degree.
Well, that's right.
That we refuse to say, well, look, some people are not.
That's right.
Shouldn't be allowed into a particular university, and the universities aren't maintaining their academic standards. Yep. Therefore, the people coming out as an employer, I can't say, well, that person's better because they've got a degree from that university. That degree might be worthless because they were a lousy student, but a lazy university that wanted to make money just let them through.
That's right. But who's the winner in all of this? The people selling the degrees.
Yes. Okay. So this brings me to a fair criticism of capitalism.
Well, what I'd say is, according to natural law, that is an irreciprocal profit.
Yes.
Therefore, immoral.
Right. Okay. But capitalism, and this is a fair criticism of capitalism, or I should say and, not but, because it supports the point. Capitalism, you know, unfortunately, there is a thing in business theory called asymmetry, or asymmetry of knowledge, information asymmetry.
Absolutely.
Right? So you benefit from information asymmetry. You benefit from the fact that I understand the market better than you, or you understand the market better than I do. Mm-hmm. The financial industry benefits from that, but so does the average retailer, right? I mean, it's a case of if you don't know you can go down the road to another shop and buy this cheaper, then you'll pay me a higher price. But if you know that the guy down the road selling it cheaper, then you'd go down to them. Now that distorts the liberal idea that the market will find the perfect price balance because there's going to be this gap in information. I couldn't get to the other store. I didn't know that it was cheaper down there, right? So that information asymmetry is one of the ways that capitalism exploits.
Yes.
And it's one of the things that people do get annoyed about, right?
It does. It does. People don't like that about that.
No, and that's the natural law part.
That's right. Well, it tests people's intuitions because once again, another way to say what I'm talking about is the science of cooperation. And you know, we want to make this empirical as much as possible. We'll just empirically test these things. Are people happy with that? So there's always, people always make their little wins. There'll be little, asymmetries of information, and people may get a win here. And so at a small scale, it's probably not a big deal. But when you're talking about a young person hitting 21 with $80,000 in debt because they've been acting on implications.
Yeah, there's a moral question.
Well,
there. There's. I've used gone back to morality.
That's right. That's right.
They're going to be pissed off. They're going to be.
It's going to create in them an incentive to retaliate or to break cooperation at the very least. They're going to be unhappy. So what you're doing is it's actually quite kumbaya when you think about it. Is we all have to get along, but this is the rules of getting along, so that it's better for everybody. But human beings, as you talk about acquisitionism, we love to break the rules for our own little benefit when we can. But a lot of people won't do that if you make them consciously aware that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And for the ones that will still do it, well, we need this.
Well, they're going to get caught eventually, and then that's going to have an implication.
That's right.
That is not in their self-interest. Eventually.
If it's encoded in law.
If it's encoded in law, which is why we need laws, and we can't leave it to.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, what we're talking about too, the science of cooperation. We're talking about the science of natural laws, natural limits, nature's limits that they will impose upon us if we violate them too much. Laws of human beings and our behaviour. And ultimately, it's like, can we upgrade our law and our systems of cooperation to
by better understanding these concepts, which gives us that higher resolution view.
That's right.
That's
right. To minimise the negative incentives with people feeling unhappy, which is actually funnel people back into cooperation because it's profitable.
Yeah,
it's good for everybody.
So number 4 is the information having
fully and exhaustively informed.
Fully and exhaustively informed. Okay.
Yep.
Number 5.
Free of externalities on the demonstrated interests of others.
Okay, now externalities is an economics concept.
Yes.
Right, the idea that there are always, it's also a concept of governing and trying to make sure that, which our politicians don't abide by a lot, which is that they tend to, it's whack-a-mole for a lot of politicians. I just don't want to see that problem in the newspaper and in the media anymore.
Yep.
So I'll just introduce these laws and regulations and we'll solve that problem. Bang. And then they don't think about all the unintended consequences.
Absolutely.
Which may include externalities, which in the economics definition means, well, I think the simplest example is pollution, right?
Yeah, secondary effects.
Yeah. So you're creating a product or a service, but you're pumping toxic chemicals into the air.
Absolutely.
And it's having a negative effect on people, and you're not paying anything for that.
Absolutely.
There's no tax. So tell me more about that.
Well, I mean,
from the natural law perspective.
Well, once again, in cooperating with people, are you creating externalities? You both might profit, because we've talked about me interacting with you voluntarily, productive exchange with you voluntarily, a warranted exchange, a fully informed exchange with you.
Free of externality.
Yeah, but is it creating, are we both profiting at Joe Bloggs' expense?
Yeah.
And creating externality for him? And once again, that any of these things you could talk about its manifestation in society till the cows come home, but that's just the basic idea.
Yeah. Okay, so it gives us a framework.
Gives us a framework.
These natural law principles.
That's right.
We're identifying them, we're saying what they are from observation. We're not imposing any kind of moral, we're just saying if these 5 things aren't met, people are going to get cranky.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's the key, right?
That's right. That's right.
Because crankiness causes WAR.
It does. It does. You look.
And RIOTSs.
That's right. If you make people cranky enough.
Yeah.
And prior to 2020, it might have been sounded like a little bit extreme, but overseas, I've seen a lot of that. Even in Australia, absolutely. People. Why do people RIOT? Well, because their demonstrated interests have been imposed upon to such a degree that they're incentivized to do it. So once again, science of cooperation isn't about you should, because that's what the right thing to do is. It's like it's a
you've got to, because these are the lateral laws.
It's gearing incentives.
Yeah.
For people.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah,
so
it's
the incentive
incentives.
is that you get to stay in government if you listen to the people.
That's right.
And I think so we look at totalitarian government like China, where it's, the people of Hong Kong have risen up, they're out on the streets, or the people in mainland China in some often cases. You just don't hear about it, so they suppress everything, so you don't hear about it. Shut down the news.
That's right.
Shut down the information sources.
That's
Just
right.
pretend it's not happening. Cover everything up.
Yeah.
Shoot the people involved. Do whatever you have to do to kind of go around and arrest people as they are doing now.
Yeah.
And we see that it's not just China. We've seen it throughout history with every
Absolutely.
totalitarian government
Absolutely.
or every authoritarian government. That's not going to win you long-term success,
No.
right? Because you're going to create this
No.
incredible upset, and then you get people who've lost relatives in conflicts and war and unjustly, and then they live their life to get revenge. And,
Absolutely.
and so we have all the problems that we have in the world.
Absolutely. The Anglosphere, well, the British created the modern state,
Yep.
and
Something we don't acknowledge terribly.
We
much.
don't
probably
acknowledge, but we
acknowledge
should.
that.
That's
Yes.
right. It's
just for a moment now, we'll have
That's
a moment
right.
of appreciation and a welcome to the modern state.
yes, yes. Thanks to the Queen.
Thank you, Your Majesty.
And so you look at communist regimes. Once again, you said with totalitarianism, does it survive long term? I'd say in a lot of ways, this authoritarianism it violates people's incentives so much that they're incentivized to drag their feet, to war against you, to undermine you, whatever. China went more capitalist, and it got richer. And now it's going more authoritarian. Let's see where they are in 10 years.
Well, they're ahead of India at the moment, but they'll be behind India. in
There's
10
always
years,
a
probably
lag,
20 years,
but yeah, look, at the end of the day, there are those people who would rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. And that's what authoritarianism is like, I'd rather be high status in a country that's not doing as well as it could than be lower status in a thriving country, And so the idea, according to theory, is that there will be consequences according to nature's laws that will catch up to you eventually. So let's see, Russia didn't compete. The Soviet Russia didn't compete with America, because what I'm talking about is a continuation of Jeffersonianism and Locke and
It takes a lot of wisdom, intelligence, foresight, patience. I mean, there are a heck of a lot of people out there who are just going to go, well, no, actually the natural law is I've got a gun, you don't, you do what I bloody say.
The incentive for those at the top who their profit is driven by having a functional, thriving society. I mean, this is an argument for monarchy as well, or even just a government of people who are governing for the best interests of the country, and everybody shares that view. I think everybody does want that.
This is where I disagree with you. I think people don't. I think there are certain small groups of people who don't want that.
Oh, small
and
groups.
I know it might take revolution, but that revolution could take 50 years, and there might be a lot of dead bodies around in the meantime, right?
Small groups, absolutely.
Yeah.
But in general, what do people want? Do people want the rule of law? Do people want to live in a thriving society? And are there enough people like us who have these conversations to get in the positions of saying, well, look, this is how we facilitate cooperation for everybody's benefit? And, I think in the COVID, this is what I talk about, the Anglosphere creating the modern state. And the Western world is quite good at building these commons. And it was a weaponization of that in the COVID thing. We do have this, well, it's good for the it's good for everybody. And there are manipulative forces now that will weaponize that. But the tendency, a lot of people still do resonate with the idea that, well, this is how you act. You run a business, you interact reciprocally with people, and it's for the greater good. If you go talk to a lot of people, it's still a pretty common sentiment. But once again, I'm talking about nature.
Well, and I think you can credit, the British Empire and the Anglosphere for that to a certain
Absolutely.
extent, but that was built on top of Greece, Rome.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it goes way back.
It
and
goes
I'm sure
way
that
back,
there
yeah.
are philosophies in the history of China as well that, in the East that would have been similar.
Absolutely.
And the Middle East, of course. But
And look, I don't want to moralize, because once again, we're just trying to keep it as scientific as possible. But you could see, Mao's revolution in China. Well, how did it work out? Is China it's doing well for some people?
Worked out in tens of millions of people dying.
That's right.
At the hands of their own government.
That's right. So at the end of the day, the most scientific thing we can
communism
say,
thing's good,
the most scientific thing we can say about it is you know, there are going to be consequences. If you don't want those consequences, don't violate reciprocity. And, you know, you might look at our society now, and I think that the reduction in our cooperative capacities, the reduction in our capture of energy, the entropy that we feel, that people like us probably intuit creeping in around us, is us falling under those same forces. We're dealing with those same ideas and those same forces ourselves now, and we can actually feel, well, there's a lot of societal upheaval. You know, you had Campbell Newman. I watched as a primer for this show. I really like Campbell. He's a great speaker,
He is, yeah.
a great guy. And he said, you know, I don't want to be in politics, but he is the embodiment of what I'm talking about, is that there is an imposition against what he sees as cooperative exchange and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so he's like, cool, I have to divert my energy away from producing to defending.
But then he doesn't get the votes to get in. I mean, he's out there saying, I'm going to, you know, and there's all these forces working against him to bring him down, and
yeah,
it's pretty depressing.
Well, look, once again, I mean, if your society can be convinced to commit suicide, then I could say that it's wrong, but it's me saying it's wrong is not going to change the outcome.
Yeah.
Because once again, like, no matter what we feel or what we say or what we wish to be the truth, nature will impose its limits at one point or another.
See, I lived in Hong Kong for 16, 17 years, and it's now part of China, right? And it struck me that the Chinese, as a people and as a culture, are some of the smartest, most pragmatic, sensible people on the planet, right? And it would seem to me that had someone sort of been able to talk sense to the Communist Party, and said these sorts of things, I mean, these are the natural laws, that they would actually seize on that and use it and do good. But, and that's sort of what they did in the 80s and 90s, and now we're seeing the reversion back, unfortunately, to the authoritarian old bad ways.
Well, that's right.
But we might see that this might just be the last hurrah, and we might see it all swing back again, harder and stronger soon.
We don't know, but once again, if I'm representing an analysis of natural laws, if China's totalitarianism had them outcompete us, I wouldn't like it. It wouldn't be my preferred outcome, because I'm very much like a cooperative British guy. But I would have to say, well, okay, that's empirically what happened. I think it's not what's happening. I think
they only outcompeted us when they started to adopt the philosophies of free market liberalism and capitalism and open up.
That's right.
And then they benefited, gotten arrogant, and shut down again.
That's right.
So, and this is the party doing this.
And they also,
now, India's got the free, but the converse of that is India, and India's got, I think they're now the most populous nation on earth. They've overtaken China on that, but their GDP is a quarter what China is.
Yep.
But they're a democracy.
Yep.
And maybe there are other factors at play here, but we also see incredibly smart people coming out of India. Especially the diaspora. Around the world. But I think you're going to see the rise of India in the next 10 years. And Australia obviously is banking on that to a certain extent. But
when I saw Albo doing the deal with the Indian president, I thought, this is our move for India to be our new China.
Yeah, of course.
And I would assume it's because China decided to lie at the beginning of the coronavirus. It's a fact that they locked down internally, yet let flights travel internationally. So they chose to undermine. That's a pretty aggressive act in my... as far as I'm aware, that's the facts. I'm pretty sure that's true.
But China and India are not sitting there going, oh, gee, we've got to win Australia over. I mean, they couldn't care less about Australia, could they?
No, but I see that.
We've got some minerals.
I see that as a pretty stark declaration that they will cooperate with us for their benefit, but ultimately, if the opportunity comes up to not play fair, they won't.
Yeah, and I think you go with the one you trust.
That's right, and I see our relationship with China deeply damaged because of that lie, and I wouldn't be surprised if the thinking of the government now is like, okay, well let's move to China. Move to India.
Yeah, well, it is, I think.
It is. And also, too, another thing...
It's probably a good thing.
Absolutely. Another thing, too, is the rise of China was, you could say, and this is, we can go off on these discussions all day, but, you could probably make the case that it was a lot of the businesses in the West breaking reciprocity by outsourcing all their manufacturing to China as well.
Right.
So does it undermine the social commons to leave your nation without jobs and outsource to slave labour in China?
And you're opening yourself up and making yourself vulnerable.
That's right.
Because you don't have the capability to even build a tank, let alone defend your own country.
That's right. So is it on behalf of those businesses, on the part of those businesses, is it an irreciprocal gain for them that undermines, once again, or creates externalities and other things for their nation?
Well, I'm loving this natural law stuff. I'm going to have to get in and have a look. It provides a framework at least to look at the world, as you say, from this higher resolution perspective. So it's a little bit more objective and scientific, less moral bashing. But we're saying, this is why these moralities exist, because we have these fundamental, intrinsic, inalienable aspects to ourselves that are there, and we all share it as humans.
Absolutely. And you can trace the social science back down to brain scans and things like that. So there's even biological bases for understanding people's intuitions.
Wow.
There's a lot of science, a lot of science behind it. And, people, will pull it together and see what we can make out of it.
Yep. Well, that was a very good introduction, Rob, to the whole concept.
Thanks.
So, naturallawinstitute.org?
.com.
.com? Okay, naturallawinstitute.com.
Honestly, just follow me on Twitter.
Okay, at Rob McMullen? What is it? At the Rob McMullen?
At the McMullen.
Because there is only one. At just the McMullen.
The McMullen.
Oh, wow. Okay, you
That's
got the whole
right.
family. Sorry,
That's
guys.
it. Any other ones? No, you don't know.
At the McMullen.
At the McMullen on Twitter.
Okay,
because, and I put, just this morning I put a little 10-minute explainer of the idea up there. But it is fascinating to see how it can knock sacred cows over for almost everybody. Yeah,
it's not just, conservatives, for libertarians, for
everybody,
not just the left.
That's right. But, and anyone listening to this, it's at the end of the day, if you want a takeaway, reciprocity is the cooperative equal sign possible between people, voluntary, productive, warranted, fully informed, free of externalities.
Perfect.
Yep.
Great to talk to you. Thanks a lot for your time, Rob. Really appreciate it. We have to get back on the show in the future.
Anytime.
All right, mate. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure.
Take care. All right, well, that's it for The Other Side Australia. A bit of a deep and heavy one, but we hope you enjoyed that version of our show this week. This is The Other Side Interviews, which is our Tuesday night interview show. Do join us every Tuesday night. We stream out on ADH TV at 6 p.m. And then, of course, the show is up online for you to watch anytime you like. And it's also available on all good podcast platforms. And if you haven't already downloaded the ADH TV app, really recommend you do so on your smartphone or on your iPad or whatever device that you happen to use, but also on your TV, because we are available on all good quality smart TVs. So before you buy a smart TV, make sure that you are able to download ADH TV on it. Make sure you ask that question. And get ADH TV on your smart television as well. Lovely Netflix type interface. You can see all our shows and you can watch them all. Alan Jones, of course, every Tuesday and Wednesday night. We've got Fred Paul most other nights. We've got Mark Stein every night at 5 p.m. There's just so many great shows. Alexandra Marshall, Spectator TV. It really is a fantastic and growing platform, and we're very happy to have you join us on it. So ADH TV, tell your friends. And as we always say, don't just like the content, please share the content, because the independent media can only survive if we start to grow and build, and we really do get your support. This is really a grassroots movement of a new kind of media. I'll catch you Friday night at 8 p.m. as we stream out The Other Side Australia, our weekly news and commentary show. Until then, I'm Damien Curry. Have a great week.